Welcome back, and we want to hear your comments on social media. The hashtag is the Modise Network. My guest is the Competition Commissioner Tembinkosi Bonakele. I want to pick up on the private sector health inquiry that has been going on for quite some time now, and relatively a huge amount of money spent on it, but somehow the work is never completed. What's holding back the progress that you've made there?
It's a huge inquiry and quite complex. If you just look at the subsectors involved there, if you look at hospitals alone, it could take you 2 years to try and understand how they price. You know, if you look at the number of procedures, before you can say that the prices are high, you need to understand how do they price a hip operation. You need to understand how do they price the gases that they provide, and so on, the facilities, the consumables. So I think it was deliberately done as a huge inquiry because you needed also to understand the intersections. So you need to understand the intersections of those providers like hospitals with funders, because you also need to understand how the medical aid schemes are structured and how that value chain works. Where is the fat, basically, if you're saying there's high prices? And they are specialists who also are critical doctors and so on. So you need to understand the entire value chain. But as you do that, the vested interests are so powerful and deep-pocketed. This inquiry didn't take off for about 8 months after we were ready. We had everybody ready, starting to work, because we had litigation. People were raising all sorts of issues. We finally managed to start, and it has proven to be quite expensive, and it's proven to be quite a complex exercise. We have gone out to say that we will not be able to complete this work this financial year because we needed to delay it, otherwise we will overspend. You know, if we were to spend all the money during this period to try and finish, it will overshoot our budget. So we are hoping to finalize it. We understand why it's so important. So many stakeholders have put a lot of money actually helping us understand what's going on. But also consumers, patients out there, they are the critical stakeholders. So we do want to see its outcomes coming out, and I'm hoping that early in the next financial year, June, July, we should be able to have finalization of it.
Well, it's a big inquiry, as you correctly point out, especially when it comes to discussing medical insurance, for instance, right? And but policymakers also, I would like to believe, depend on the outcome of this inquiry. National health insurance, to a large extent, will be informed by the outcomes. Are there any particular salient points that are coming out of this inquiry that you think are helping at least you as commissioners understand what's going on within that sector?
Well, the first thing that the interim report, because we have a provisional report that's already out, it does allude to the problem of the market not working particularly well, because there's information asymmetry. Patients don't really know when they go to a doctor which hospital they'll end up at and which specialists will end up treating them, and the costs involved, because everybody kind of labors under this impression that there's a medical aid that's going to cover this. Well, you pay for the medical aid, but you pay as a collective. You don't pay as a... So it all goes into a single pot. Now, how do you incentivize the consumer, the patient, to manage that cost, to be aware that the cost are going to increase for everybody if they increase, so you don't abuse the medical aid? And how do you make sure that they are also active? Because medical aid schemes, they are owned by members, but members are not active in managing them. So you have administrators who essentially, in most instances, this is what the report suggests, have almost taken over the role of medical aid schemes, which is supposed to be owned by members. So that's a problem. Then you have a problem of concentration. So if you look at hospital groups, we only have 3 real or 4 real players who, according to the report, have market power. And then you have in medical aid schemes one particular provider of medical insurance that is so powerful and so big that their profits are so obscene, it suggests that there is a market power issue there as well. So those are the provisional reports that are out there. There is also things for regulators in the report. I think the report came out strongly that the Department of Health, for an example, could have done more in implementing the National Health Act, which would have alleviated some of the problems. But it's provisional. I don't want to pass any judgments now, but the report is public, it's out there.
Let's quickly touch on the other inquiries that you are looking at or should be looking at. The one that comes to mind is the cost of data in the country, that, you know, because of the few, only 3 players and 2 major ones, well, 4 if you include Telkom now, when it comes to the cell phone operators, right, that they seem to be colluding somehow or fixing the prices of data. Is there room from the inquiries that you are holding or the reports you've received, room for data costs to be brought down in South Africa?
This is an issue that this inquiry is debating, so I don't want to jump into conclusions. But I would say that there seems to be very little dispute amongst stakeholders, operators included, that as a country, our costs are relatively high and they can be brought down. There's disagreements about how they should be brought down. Some of the operators, for example, are suggesting that if you release spectrum quick enough, you will be able to drive this cost down. There are people who are saying, well, the regulators also could have done better, and even if you release the spectrum, there is a possibility of abuse because the larger providers are able to, you know, you can't really, there's network effects here. So if a lot of people are with a particular provider, that provider has an inherent advantage because people would want to call within that network, and it gets cheaper to operate within that. So there are a lot of debates about exactly where should our prices be, but also if they are high, what is the solution? And that's something that at the moment I cannot talk about.
Well, the President spoke about the concentration of influence in particular sectors by certain companies, and thus the amendment to the law. Now, if you can just talk me through the particular aspects that are likely to be affected by this new law, and which sectors you think have got the highest concentration of monopolistic practices.
Well, the President really spoke, I think, in earnest about this being a sore point post our democratic dispensation, that they took over an economy that was highly concentrated and that excluded people. But it seems that it has not changed. And it's probably an indictment on everybody, ourselves included, that this has not changed. There has been studies done. We have done a study ourselves where we looked at various sectors of the South African economy. It's quite disappointing to say that it's almost every sector, so I don't even have to mention them. You know, whether you go to financial services, you go to telecoms, we were talking them about now, to transport, everything. The President was saying, even the brands you see in the street, when you compare walking downtown in Johannesburg, the brands are the same compared to everywhere else in the world. So we do have a particular problem as South Africa. So the bill aims to do a few things to alleviate this. The one is to get people to trade, do business with small business and black-owned enterprises. So you can't refuse, according to this law, to do business with these groups merely because they are either black or small as SMMEs. It's quite a complex thing to get to the law itself, but at least that is the intention. And also, if you are abusing your dominance so much that all other instruments have failed, this law now allows that a company can be broken up. So a market inquiry can be held, and if it finds that there's so much abuse of a very strong market power, there is no other instrument to deal with it. You can eventually break up the firms. There are provisions about particular conduct of large firms, for an example, on how they price. Excessive pricing is featuring very prominently in the bill, as well as predatory pricing. There is a practice by firms where they can charge prices lower than their cost, so that the smaller competitors especially could not sustain those prices.
Yeah.
They get out of the market. After that, they can put up the prices. So all of those things are part of this package. But also importantly, we have this fourth industrial revolution that is being talked about. Well, it works in terms of firms getting larger, having owning platforms that are dominant and control particularly information, data. So the likes of Google, Facebook, these are all companies whose business model is based on data. And most people's information, data, on how they consume products, how they buy products, is in the hands of these companies. Companies like Uber, for an example, they would know typically when do you call Uber. They would know which price you can take. They would know when it's raining, prices must go up. Now, how do you regulate that? This bill also, I think, responds to that, to say that in complex situations like that, you have a possibility of doing a market inquiry and understand what's going on.
Very short question, brief response. So any member of the public can approach the Competition Commission to raise a matter. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Well, and a lot of work that is lying ahead of you now with this new bill. But we hope to see changes in time as you implement the law. Thanks very much for having been our guest.
Thanks for inviting me.
And that's Tembinkosi Bonakele, the Competition Commissioner, who's been our guest. As you can tell, a lot of work to be done and has been done by the Competition Commission. And thank you for joining the Modise Network. Be sure to tune in again next week, Saturday.